Singapore Senior Minister Loong says cooperation between Singapore and China is, quote, especially valuable amid a more uncertain and troubled international environment. Lee met Chinese President Xi Jinping this afternoon. The two leaders were at the Diaoyutai State Guesthouse in Beijing. Lee is on a 6-day visit to China, which began on Sunday. And more, we're joined by Olivia Siong live from Beijing. Olivia, you were in the room when this meeting between Lee and President Xi took place. What did you get from this meeting?
Wei Su, you have to point out that it's not just a meeting, but Mr. Li also being hosted to a dinner by the Chinese president this evening. But in opening remarks during that sit-down, Mr. Li said that bilateral ties between the two countries have continued to strengthen since they were upgraded last year. Now, that taking place during Mr. Li's last visit to China back in March, where he also met the Chinese president. Now, citing examples of how bilateral ties have continued to grow, Mr. Li said he's glad that Mr. Xi has met his successor, referring to the new Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong. They met on the sidelines of the APEC summit in Peru earlier this month. Singapore and China also holding the APEC forum that's held annually in Singapore just a few weeks ago, with 25 agreements being signed. And Mr. Li, referring to all this, said that such cooperation is especially valuable amid greater uncertainties in the world. Now, Mr. Li didn't mention any specific countries, but we do know that China and the US have faced strained relations in recent years. And analysts have said that competition is set to continue with the incoming Trump administration. Have a listen.
Tensions between major powers have intensified. Countries are emphasizing national security, supply chain resilience, instead of economic integration and international multilateral cooperation. And it makes it all the more important in such an environment for like-minded countries, big ones as well as small ones, to work together to develop our cooperation to the best of our ability for the benefits of our peoples.
Now, Mr. Li is no stranger to China, having visited the country 14 times as Singapore's Prime Minister. And this is something that Mr. Xi alluded to in his opening remarks during that meeting, calling Mr. Li an old and good friend of China. Have a listen.
去年我们共同确立了中心全方位、高质量的前瞻性伙伴关系，为两国关系发展明确了战略方向。明年是中心建交35周年，要进一步加强发展战略对接，深化各领域合作，为两国人民带来更多的福祉，为地区和平和繁荣做出新的更大的贡献。
Now, Mr. Xi also cited the example of the Suzhou Industrial Park, which marks its 30th anniversary this year. Senior Minister Li attending a whole slew of commemorative events just yesterday in Suzhou itself. Now, Mr. Xi said this project, which is the first government-to-government project between Singapore and China, has set an example for bilateral cooperation, and that this was an example of Singapore's deep involvement in China's reform and opening up. Wei Su.
Olivia, of course, Lee also met with a known advisor, political advisor to President Xi Jinping. Of course, he's chairman of the CPPCC, Wang Huning. Now, this meeting also matters because Mr. Wang is a known political theorist to the party. What came out of that meeting?
That's right, Wei Su, what you mentioned there, and also to point out that Mr. Wang is China's number 4 ranking official. And so this is a significant meeting between top leaders of both countries. And Mr. Wang had actually also met Mr. Li when then PM Li visited China back in March. And Mr. Li said that he's happy to see that there's been continued strong momentum of high-level exchanges between the two countries, adding that the upgrade in bilateral ties seen last year reflected mutual commitment to deepen and refresh cooperation in both traditional and new areas. For example, Singapore and China, if you recall, earlier this year introduced a 30-day mutual visa-free program. And on his part, Mr. Wang added that he also believes that Mr. Li will continue to play an important role as senior minister in promoting friendship between the two countries, also as Singapore and China mark 35 years of diplomatic relations next year. Wei Su.
Oh, thanks, Olivia Siong, reporting on Senior Minister Lee Hsien Loong's 6-day visit to China.